church benches and into the trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
3, 2, 1. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm your host, once again, the admirable, formidable, whatever other kind of adjectives I feel like throwing in there. My name is Riley Lowe, and I'm going to attempt to scale a mountain this morning as I'm coming to you. So one of the, I alluded to it. Actually, I didn't allude to it. I actually read it last week when I was talking about was Jonah dead or alive, right? That was such a cool thought exercise, really. I really, man, I lean heavily on the side of that Jonah was dead and actually resurrected. Now, up until being challenged on that, I was 100% in the he was alive camp the whole time, right? And so you go 43 years or however long in the alive camp and you're challenged and it makes you go, huh. And so I think that's just the importance of, I guess keeping an open mind, which I'll, by all means, even if I don't agree with a position, especially a biblical position, let's talk about it. Because, my positions on different things have changed and moved around. The only thing that I'm 100% dead set on really is that Jesus was God incarnate and he was crucified and he died. And after 3 days, resurrected himself and bore witness to over 500 plus people and for 40 days and then ascended to the right hand of God. So he died for our sins. He atoned for our sins. He paid my sin debt. There's nothing I can do. I can't live a perfect life. You know why I can't live a perfect life? Because I haven't lived a perfect life. Whereas Jesus did live a sinless life, right? So that tight-knit group of salvific things, I do not waver on. Now, there's other things that are not salvific, which salvific is just a fancy way of saying stuff that hinges on salvation, right? Now, is there other denominations and sects and religions that have things that they claim to be salvific that I don't think biblically are? Yes. But that is what it is. So this is going to be one of them things. So of all of the scriptures in the Bible, there's a handful, okay, that are very difficult. And here I am, a novice podcaster. This is going to be episode 57 of my podcast. So what better time to try and conquer what many claim to be the most difficult passage in the Bible, right? Yeah, seems good to me. Right? Have you ever trained to climb Mount Everest, Mr. Lowe? No, but I'm figure I'll give it a shot. So here we go. So this is, I kind of alluded to how the thought exercise and the discussion and the exploring of Jonah tied into this. This is going to be 1 Peter 3, specifically 1 Peter 3:19, but this is going to be 1 Peter 3:18 through 22. Okay? So if you remember last time I was talking about how Jonah said that he went down into Sheol and the bars, kind of like a prison, and he was in a pit, and the bars of the earth closed behind him, all that stuff down here. And how I kind of alluded to how that ties in to 1 Peter 3:19. So let's first just dive right in here. 1 Peter 3 is going to be 18 through 22. Verse 18. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the sins for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. There is also an antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of the filth from the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God. Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven, and it is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. So he kind of wrapped up a lot of what I just said as far as what is salvific, which that's kind of handy there. I actually hadn't put that together until just now that he kind of gives a synopsis of what is salvific in the Bible. And so he kind of gives a short, condensed version of the gospel, but he throws in there in verse 19, after he says, let me read verse 18 again. For Christ also suffered once for sins, for the unjust, that he might bring us to God. That's us. Being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. So once he died, he was in the spirit form. His body's dead, he's in the spirit. By whom, this is verse 19, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah. In other words, in the days of Noah, while Noah was alive, there was something happening, and these spirits were disobedient during that time, and divine long-suffering waited. In other words, God waited for a period there, as God does. We're so good that God does that, and so glad that God does that. Otherwise, I deserve to be killed immediately. You deserve to be killed immediately. We deserve to be wiped off the face of the earth. But thank goodness we serve a long-suffering God, right? Who is slow to anger, who slow to wrath. It will come, but he is slow to that. He gives us more chances to turn around, right? So the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah. So out of all the people on the earth there, it says, well, and Noah was preaching the whole time, right? I'm going to read verse 19 one more time just because it needs to be reiterated. This is what we're focusing on. By whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Who were these spirits in prison? Who were they? All right. And now I'm going to go back and tell you, like I said, Jonah is what led me here. All right. Now, I've talked about 1 Peter 3:19 before with a couple people and tried to explore that, and I never got a good grasp on it. And it wasn't until going through this thought exercise and this discussion with about Jonah that it kind of started leading me that direction. Remember, I talked about how Jesus pointed back to Jonah, right? And so Jonah had said, out of the belly of Sheol I cried. In other words, out of the underworld. And he said, what did he say here? I went down to the moorings of the mountain, the bottom. The earth with its bars closed behind me forever. In other words, he was in a pit, in a prison with its bars closing behind me. He was in a pit. You have brought my life up from the pit, right? He was in a prison. He was in a pit. Revelation talks about the bottomless pit is where Satan and his angels are going to be cast into, right? So, or he's loosed from out of the end of the millennial reign. He's loosed from the bottomless pit. So it's one of those deals where that kind of gives this impression. And what this, I've done a lot of reading and exploring and thinking about this, right? So there's two main explanations, if you will. And one of them is that if we look here in verse 19, it talks about how one explanation is saying that Jesus, when he went to spirit form, he was outside of time. And this is where I was at for a little bit, honestly. He just kind of went outside of time, and then he goes and it's talking about when he was back in the days of Noah, preaching through Noah to the world that was purely evil around him, right? Noah was preaching for like 120 years to the world around him. And that 1 Peter 3:19 is kind of like having a flashback to that, right? He gets in the spirit and remember, it's kind of like going back in time and talking about when he was there. Now, here's the thing. The reality is there is a spiritual battle, a spiritual realm, which is quite honestly these days ramping up and on the earth. Now, there is also another dimension, if you will, where there is a battle or a war going on, right now. And there has been since Satan fell from heaven. So let's look at the fall of Lucifer, all right? Let's look at Isaiah 14, verse 12. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest side of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. That's his things. You shall be brought down to Sheol, down to the underworld, to the lowest depths of the pit. There you go. That ties right in there with Jonah, right? So Lucifer had this pride and arrogance of he thought he was better than God. And quite honestly, today, a lot of people think that they are better than God. They don't need God. If you say, I don't need a God, you're saying, I am God. I'm my own God. And that's it's the exact same thing that Lucifer did. Now let's look in there. So how did Lucifer try to continue on that path actually? The first time we kind of see him, quote, in the Bible is the serpent in the garden. And when he deceived Eve and thus caused Adam to fall as well, God told him he's gonna eat dust, he's gonna do all, but he says he made a promise to the serpent. He made a promise to Satan. He shall bruise your head. Who is he? He is the seed of the woman, right? The eventual lineage of Eve will smash his head, Satan's head. But you, Satan, shall bruise his heel. In other words, Satan is going to have a small victory, and the seed and the lineage of the woman is going to have a small setback, while Satan is going to be eventually destroyed. So ever since then, Satan has been there's a war, a battle going on where Satan is constantly trying to interrupt that lineage, right? If he can wipe off that lineage, if he can make it where it's impossible to fulfill that promise right there, that the seed, the line of the woman is going to smash his head. If he can disrupt that, then he thinks he can beat God. And so let's look at that. So remember, that was in the Garden of Eden. Now listen to this. This is Ezekiel 28, verse 12. We're starting at the middle of verse 12. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald with gold. The workmanship of your timbrels and pipes was prepared for you on the day you were created. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways. And from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you, till the pride, till he thought he was better than God. By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. He gets kicked out of where he's at. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. He thought he was the best, even better than God. But notice up there, you were in Eden, the garden of God. This is talking about Satan. All right. Now, when he fell, this is how cunning he was. He convinced a third of the angels to come with him and join his side against God. Right? And so let's look at this. Revelation 12:3. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his head. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And that's where it's talking about he dragged a third of the angels. Now, how many angels were there in heaven? I don't know. There's another view in Revelation where John sees this view of, God, I don't remember where, I don't have it pulled up here, but it's like 10,000 times 10,000. Anyway, it ends up being over 1 million angels that he sees in heaven. So if that's 2/3, then you could say 1/3 is, around 500,000 angels. So that's a lot of angels that fell with Satan and are doing battle right here. Okay. So, okay. So then, we covered he was in the Garden of Eden, but then he has his little minions, right, to start wreaking havoc. All right, and so this is going to help clue us into who those spirits were. Remember, let's look 1 Peter 3:19. By whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Okay, so let's look at Genesis 6, verse 1. Now, this is a lot of jumping around and it's a lot of thinking. Okay, so I really hope this makes sense. If this does not make sense, just let me know. So it says, now it came to pass, this is Genesis 6:1. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men. They said, ooh, look at those. That they were beautiful. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. In other words, you got 120 years to get right. There were, and that's how long lifespans are going to be after he does this, right? There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old men of renown. So then he goes on and destroys the earth. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to back this up. So it seems like these spirits, or these angels, these fallen angels, all right, were the sons of God mentioned here. They're angels. They're fallen angels, but they're angels. They possessed, just like there was one example, I don't remember where it's at, when Jesus comes walking along, and there was a possessed man. He's like, hey, whoa. The spirit's in him, says, please, this is not the time. Don't throw us into the pit. Don't throw us into prison. Don't throw us into hell yet, right? Don't lock us up. It's not the time, right? And so, but it also, there's some spirits that they overstepped their bounds, I guess. Just like God kind of gave Satan as weird as it is, he gave Satan some reign and some leeway over Job, right? To kind of affect things. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know the ways of God. All I know is that's what the Bible says. And so it seems to me that there was fallen angels that possessed these men and basically overstepped their bounds and were running around raping women and causing them to have kids and just wreaking havoc and causing the human race to fall into a point where it was almost unredeemable except for Noah and his family, right? That was it. Everybody else, probably millions and millions of people, had to be killed in the flood. And also at this point was when these spirits that overstepped their bounds were locked up, right? So let's look at let's see here. Let's look at 2 Peter 2 verses 4. And let's go 4 and 5. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down into hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing the flood on the ungodly. God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. I believe right now, notice I'm leaving myself an out there. Right now, I believe that that's speaking of when these fallen angels overstepped their bounds, right? And went and like God said, here's your limits. And they overstepped their limits. And then they had to suffer greatly because of that. They got locked up because of that. Now, God had an out. God always has an out for himself. And, can make another path. But that's, I think that, so that the Nephilim, all right, or the sons of God, the fallen angels, possessed men, had offspring, and made the world such an evil place that it was unredeemable. And then the flood wiped them out, and they were cast into the pit. Now, they were cast there, and they were not privy to much. They were probably waiting a news of their leader, Satan, of a great victory, what I think. Now, they may or may not know that there's this battle going on. So here's what's happening. There's a constant battle going on. I know I'm going long on time here. So here's evidence. Every now and then we get a little peek behind the curtain on some evidence. All right, this is going to be Daniel 10, verse 10 through 14. This is going to be 10 verses 10 through 14. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. This is an angel touches Daniel on the shoulder. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. He sent from God. While he was speaking to me, I stood trembling. That's what happens when you meet angels. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, the archangel, one of the chief princes, came to help me. For if I had been left alone there with the king of Persia, now I come to you to understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision refers to many days yet to come. He's getting ready to give them Daniel visions regarding the future, right? Eschatology type stuff, visions, all right? So this, it doesn't name this angel, but he says, I was on my way to come and talk to you, Daniel, but I had to wait 21 days because I was battling out with this fallen prince, with the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. In other words, this fallen angel kind of has this territory, which makes sense when you look at the way that the ancient world was organized, as far as this area serves these gods, this area serves those gods, and that other area, they serve those gods. That's why serving the one true God was so revolutionary, because they had these little areas where they served their gods. Now, I think that they had influence from the demons that patrolled or controlled those areas, right, and had influence over those areas. So they kind of got some battlefields drawn up there, and that angel, that fallen angel, withstood this good angel that was coming to talk to Daniel. And actually, he had to call for backup from Michael, the archangel, to help him. So when that happens, it's basically just letting us know there is a constant battle that we cannot see. It goes back to what I said at the beginning, right? There's a constant struggle and a constant battle that we do not see. Satan's trying to get the upper hand constantly. Satan says, "Hey, I'm going to cause Adam and Eve to sin." Boom, because I'm better than God. I'm going to convince them that they don't need God. I'm going to trick them, right? And he does that. They fall. Then he convinces. I think, anyway, it seems evidence this way, leads Cain to kill Abel. And he thinks, problem solved. Now the one who gave the good sacrifice to God is dead now. So all we got left is the bad guy. Well, then here comes the line of Seth, right? It goes through the whole way. He's trying to do this. He's trying to kill off, even in modern times. You know, you had Herod killing all the babies. You had Pharaoh killing all the firstborn, I was wrong. He didn't kill the first. That was the Passover. Never mind. Maybe I can edit that out in post. But anyway, so it's and then you even had Hitler trying to wipe Jews off the face of the earth. Now look right now where we're at today. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, what's from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea? That's Israel there. They're trying to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. The evil one is trying to make that happen. He thinks that if he can wipe all of the promised people off of the face of the earth, then there's no way that God can fulfill all his promises. Well, he thought he had done that whenever he crucified Jesus. They realized that. And I think that's the news that those people, that those spirits were waiting on in 1 Peter 3:19, by whom he also went and preached to the spirits in prison. They were waiting, right? I think that they were waiting for that to happen. They were waiting for it for the good news. Okay, we won. And Jesus went and in spirit form and was evidence to him. It was more like, hey, spoiler alert, I win. Spoiler alert, I win. You don't win. You're still locked up. I win. It was kind of like God. It was, instead of preaching, it was more like proclaiming or heralding, like that a crier for the king would go around the kingdom and say, hey, the Lord God has claimed a great victory. It was along those lines. That's what he was doing. He was claiming victory to those spirits. Why? I don't know. He didn't have to do that. He didn't need to do that. He ain't got to do that, but he did it. That's what I just think it happened. I've really racked my brain on this, and I think that's the most logical explanation. Now, maybe I'm going to save this for next week because we're way over time. And I'm going to talk about how I'm going to talk about Hebrews 13:2. Hebrews 13:2. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels. So I hope you have a blessed day. I hope this gives you a lot to think about. If you come up with a different explanation or a better explanation, then by all means, tear mine apart and let me know. Till then, have a blessed day.